Continuing with what I've been doing for the previous part of the week, I'm looking at the cut on Richard III's skull, which radiates out from the condylar canal here, outwards towards the two foramen just here. It's a cut which is probably just about long enough to accommodate that amount of this bollock dagger. So you can see a reasonably slim blade like this will actually penetrate quite deeply into the medulla oblongata here, causing all kinds of problems. Now, instead of this using a helmet which is not period specific, what I've done is I've gone out and grabbed myself one which is period specific, and this is called a Sallet. This is one of the most popular kinds of helmet that was actually available at the time. A German design, so popular and effective that it actually ended up being the prototype for the German Stahlhelm of World War I, which then of course went all the way right through to World War II in the M1935 helmet. Visored, he said, it can be used on horseback, it can actually be used on foot. It is a very effective helm. Rounded, so glancing blows will actually go off of it. A long nape at the back of the neck, which we've been discussing in the context of shot traps, which I'm going to demonstrate in a few minutes. And all in all, quite a high status helm. So popular that virtually everybody wore them. By 1485 an English variety had come out based on the Burgundian style of helm. These though, because they didn't sit all the way onto the head, were often used in conjunction with one of these, which is a biveur. As you can see, sitting on me, it actually covers the throat quite effectively from here all the way right up to kind of mid-face level. The idea being here that the visors of the Sallet would then overlap here, thus allowing very, very little in the way of plunging fire from arrows, crossbow quarrels, and the most powerful hits which come from below to actually penetrate below. These are going to be demonstrated in a few minutes anyway. The reason why we're concentrating on this though is to ensure that we actually have a way of injuring Richard without the necessity of removing a helm like this. As you can see, this has a chin strap. Once the biveur is on, the chin strap's below that. It's highly unlikely that anybody could slip a hand in and undo it. It's also highly unlikely, considering he'd most likely be wearing gauntlets, that Richard would have done it himself. These are actually ridiculously difficult to remove from somebody who's also fighting back. So we need to explain why somebody who's wearing this on the head receives so many head injuries. We're now going to go on and look at 3 ways that it could have actually happened. This radiating cut could have been inflicted while this was still in situ, using 3 separate weapons, a sword, a bill and a glaive, all of which would have most likely been in the area when this happened to it. Enjoy. Continuing on from what we've been doing earlier in this series, this is a glaive, a very popular weapon from 1485. Now we're actually going to look at the potential for a shot trap between an armoured back piece and a period specific helm. In this case, the helm itself is a Sallet. If my glamorous assistant can actually look towards the camera, you can see how the Sallet works in conjunction with something called the biveur. The biveur sits covering the bottom part of the face because the Sallet sits on top of the head and is actually quite shallow. However, the crown itself does fit all the way down just around the peritial bone and down towards the occipital. However, as can be seen here, using the corazina and pushing straight up again, we have the shot trap effect. The actual neck of the Sallet will bring the weapon into the top and hit right on the occipital bone. Now, to add momentum and cutting effect to this, most people would not be aiming up like so. They'd be using the cutting edge itself, because the cutting edge in this instance would be on the inside of the arc. Does it still work? So coming in from underneath, utilising that shot trap effect directly underneath the helm. The nape directs the point of the blade into the condylar arch, wrong condylar foramen, and again the cut will be radiating out. This would be more noticeable if the head was slightly inclined to the right and looking down, which would be the perfect position for fighting somebody on the right side of the horse. Again, with the head in that position, I have very little trouble getting the hip straight in to the left-hand side using the armour itself to direct it. Now that's with the glaive. Would it work with any other pole? This would be one of the more common weapons on the battlefield. A weapon which is designed to be used in formation, but also as an individual weapon. It also extends the critical distance of the user out as far as the pole itself will actually extend. The cutting edge on here and here allows penetrating attacks because this will actually cut through flesh and to a certain extent bone, provided there's plenty of momentum behind it. Cutting edge here, which will actually allow a weapon to go behind a limb or behind arm. And finally, the back spike here, which, as we've seen before, allows a very, very powerful long arc hit on top of the opponent and specifically onto the head. Now the question is, will this still fit inside? With the cutting edge, again, to the inside of the arm, the shotgun effect will, most of the time, allow it to move straight in. It won't hit every single time because remember, this is a long weapon. But even when it's used at its fullest extent, and very often, from behind the horse, goes straight in and directly into the opponent. So very often, this hit is possible. It's not 100% certain every time, but a good 75% of the time, it will go straight up underneath, provided it's actually cut slightly from the right to the left, using again the armour to knock directly into the base of the occipital. So this is one of the most common weapons on the battlefield, and one which is more likely to be used by a man-at-arms or a dismounted man against a mounted individual, can perform the same injury, or create the same kind of injury. Now the question is, can this wound be recreated using a hand-and-a-half sword? Well, this is a modern representation, obviously kept blunt for the purposes of demonstration, of a hand-and-a-half sword used from the late 14th century right through into the 16th century. This can kill by blunt force trauma, utilising the quillons. It can kill by incising, using the cutting edge, and it can kill using penetrating attacks. It is also possible to use this weapon in what's called the half sword, utilising the length of the blade itself to accommodate a hand on the halfway point of the weapon, giving you extra ability to block, but at the same time also allowing you to direct a blow using both hands, making it slightly more accurate, and also allowing you to use those back muscles to pull the blade into an arc. Now the question is, can this work again? And the answer is, very easily. The difference is, with a sword, I'm actually almost at full extension. Bearing in mind, I'm 6 feet tall, and Marie, my glamorous assistant, is 5'8", the same height as Richard III would have been. It means that I am actually still fully extended on the 17-hand horse. However, it can be used in other directions, or should I say other methods as well. Coming straight up, using the left hand to provide motive force by pushing forwards with, in this case, the left quadricep and extending the body out. It's possible again to generate the same radiating cut from the base of the occipital. So we have 3 weapons that could have actually been used to generate that wound without the necessity for removing the helmet. The helmet, while it's still in situ, is vulnerable to an upward hit underneath, utilising the shock trap effect to allow the blade itself and the point to be directed to a vulnerable, relatively unarmoured part of the head. This is also a hit that would be immediately debilitating. causing at the very least disorientation and ataxia, opening up the veins here at the back of the head, also cutting through these muscles which support the head. It also utilises the weight of an opponent against the blow. Initially, until the skull itself cracks and gives, the weight of the skull and the weight of the armour on the skull will be aiding the penetration. Instead of moving away from the blow, they're going to be moving into it. I do believe I may have actually killed my glamorous assistant. This also means I don't have to try and penetrate any of the hard shell armour to try and bring a hit onto my opponent. There are other places I could do this into the armpit, but that would actually be covered by voiders, which are male sleeves, which come down to cover vulnerable points here. I could try aiming at the back of the leg. However, that's not an immediately debilitating attack. And this person actually has the capability of hurting me while this is happening. So I want to be able to put my opponent down as fast as possible. I don't want to give them the opportunity to hurt me, somebody who's being paid to be here and fight. I want to go away and enjoy my wages later, and possibly even the sale of the horse. Richard's armour may have failed him in a different way. Richard charged into combat. This was a common way of attacking an opponent, moving forwards at high speed. In order to retain the integrity of the forward part of the armoured envelope, Richard would have been wearing a bivouac, which would have probably been closed up to his sallet and been restricted to looking just through the eye holes over the arrow shelf of his sallet. This can now be seen on Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie, to see me as an opponent, has to lean forwards. This leaning forwards and looking down over the sallet, or the bottom part of the sallet visor, will open up the back side of the sallet. This leaves the back side of the sallet even more open and vulnerable to a penetrating attack. Using the back armour and the nape of the sallet, this wound would be immediately debilitating, and possibly, with the momentum and motive force of the muscles, even have forced Richard off of his horse to where he would be vulnerable to attack on the ground. Now, seeing how this radiating wound here could have actually been inflicted without the necessity to remove the helmet, which in the context of combat is highly unlikely unless Richard was actually debilitated or to the point that he couldn't actually resist its removal. What I'm going to be doing next is looking at the ways in which it could have actually been inflicted post-mortem, and I'm also now, on the next phase of this, going to be looking at how the other injuries can actually sit in the context of this being the first and possibly most debilitating injury. Possibly even the first injury that was actually fatal. So, next video we're going to be getting Eddie out in armour and beating the crap out of him with various weapons. Talk to you later.